expected, more exciting and more consequential with every passing day. And the stories breaking around Old Trafford this week cover every corner of the club, from the transfer targets being discussed in internal meetings to the player exits being ordered by Sir Jim Ratcliffe himself. There is a lot to get through, so let us get straight into it. The Aurelien Tchouameni situation has moved from the realm of speculation into something considerably more concrete this week, with The Athletic confirming that the Real Madrid midfielder's name has been raised directly in Manchester United internal meetings. That is a significant escalation from the general monitoring and interest that was being reported previously, and it tells you that the people at Old Trafford who are making the recruitment decisions for next season have looked at Tchouameni specifically, discussed him specifically, and are seriously evaluating whether he represents the right solution for the midfield rebuild that this summer demands. The complication that United acknowledge is whether Real Madrid would be willing to let him go, with Los Blancos also understood to be discussing a contractual extension with the Frenchman. That extension conversation could close the door on a potential United move before it fully opens, and the coming weeks will determine whether Madrid's planning for next season includes Tchouameni as a central figure, or whether the arrival of a replacement, potentially in the form of Rodri from City, creates the space for his departure that United are hoping for. The Chelsea-Fernandes-Real Madrid domino connection that was discussed earlier this week adds context to why United are monitoring this situation so carefully. If Real Madrid signed Fernandes from a Chelsea club that desperately needs to generate transfer funds, Tchouameni's position at the Bernabeu becomes considerably more uncertain, and United want to be positioned to move quickly when and if that uncertainty crystallises into availability. Having his name in the internal meetings now means the groundwork is being done, the scouting reports are being compiled, the financial modelling is being completed, and United will not be scrambling to catch up when the transfer window opens. The Mickey van de Ven story has taken a turn that United supporters will find simultaneously all interesting and frustrating, with TalkSport's Ben Jacobs revealing the most significant and most direct piece of intelligence yet about the Dutch defender's own preferences. Jacobs confirmed that if Tottenham are relegated and Van de Ven leaves, the 25-year-old would turn down a move to Manchester United if Liverpool offered him the alternative. That is a blunt and uncomfortable piece of news for United, who have been monitoring Van de Ven as part of their summer defensive planning, given the injuries and suspensions that have decimated their backline during the most critical period of the season. The player's preference for Liverpool over United reflects a hierarchy of attraction that exists among top players when evaluating their options. And while it stings, it is also an honest assessment of where these two clubs currently sit in terms of what they can offer in terms of project, history, and immediate competitive ambition. However, the story has a crucial twist that changes the entire picture. Jacobs also revealed that the appointment of Roberto De Zerbi as Tottenham manager has boosted the chances of Van de Ven extending his stay at Spurs if relegation is avoided, with Tottenham sources indicating that a contract extension is now more likely than a departure if the club manages to stay up. Spurs face an absolutely critical trip to already relegated Wolves this weekend, a fixture they absolutely must win if they are to have any realistic chance of surviving the drop, and the outcome of that match will determine whether the Van de Ven saga becomes a genuine and pressing transfer conversation this summer or disappears entirely. If Spurs survive, United lose their best chance of acquiring Van de Ven regardless of his Liverpool preference, because the player himself is described as more likely to stay under De Zerbi. If Spurs go down, Van de Ven leaves, Liverpool are his first choice, and United would need to either improve their offer significantly or accept that this particular target is not going to happen. The Christian Romero situation runs parallel to the Van de Ven story and is actually more straightforward from United's perspective, with Jacobs confirming that Romero is likely to leave Tottenham this summer whether they stay up or go down. The Argentine centre-back's probable availability at a price United are comfortable paying, reported at around £57 million, makes him a more realistic and potentially more achievable defensive addition than Van de Ven. And unlike his defensive partner at Spurs, there is no reported preference for Liverpool that complicates the conversation. United being linked with both Van de Ven and Romero simultaneously suggests the club is taking a pragmatic approach to defensive recruitment, pursuing multiple options in the knowledge that only one or possibly two will ultimately be available and affordable within the constraints of this summer's budget. Rafael Leao's potential availability from AC Milan is the most exciting and most expensive attacking target to have been formally linked with United this week, with the Daily Mail confirming that the Portuguese winger is being considered as United look to strengthen the attacking line following Carrick's indication last month that a left winger is a priority position for the summer. Leao is one of the most dynamic and most gifted wide attackers in Serie A, a player whose pace, skill and direct goal-threatening quality have made him one of the most admired wide forwards in European football since his emergence at Milan. The asking price of £60 million is not cheap, but it is also not unreasonable for a player of his profile and his contract situation being tied to Milan until 2028. And if United's summer budget extends to the scale being reported, then Leao represents exactly the kind of premium quality investment that Champions League recruitment demands. The competition for Leao is likely to be significant from multiple European clubs, and United would need to move decisively and convincingly to persuade both Milan and the player that Old Trafford is the right destination for the next chapter of his career. The Champions League football that United are on the verge of confirming for next season is crucial in any such conversation, as Leao's ambitions will require European football at the highest level and a club that cannot offer that simply cannot compete for his signature regardless of the wages and the contract length on offer. The Marcus Rashford situation has taken its most definitive turn yet this week, with reports from Sport claiming that Barcelona manager Hansi Flick and sporting director Deco have agreed that they are not willing to spend the required money on either the transfer fee or the wages to make his loan deal permanent. The cost of completing the transaction has been described as simply too high by Barcelona's hierarchy, who have been trying to renegotiate the £26 million option fee downwards, and have been told by United that the agreed price is non-negotiable. The consequence of that impasse is that Rashford looks likely to return to Manchester United this summer, a development that creates a genuinely complex situation for everyone involved. Rashford returning to a United under Michael Carrick, the manager who replaced the regime under which the breakdown in the player's relationship with the club originated, is a very different prospect from Rashford returning under any of the previous managers. Carrick is the manager who transformed the dressing room atmosphere, who rebuilt trust between players and coaching staff, and who has demonstrated through every aspect of his management that he evaluates players on what they can contribute going forward, rather than on the baggage of whatever preceded his arrival. Whether Rashford has a future at United under Carrick will depend entirely on conversations that have not yet happened and on the player's own willingness to commit to the project with the dedication and the professionalism that Carrick demands from every member of his squad. But the return is now looking likely, and how it is managed will be one of the most closely watched stories of the entire summer. Sir Jim Ratcliffe's intervention on Manuel Ugarte is the clearest and most direct statement of intent from the Ineos ownership about a specific player situation that has been publicly reported so far. Goal claimed that Ratcliffe has ordered United to transfer list the Uruguayan midfielder this summer following his failure to establish himself at the club since his arrival from PSG in 2024. The performance against Leeds United is described as the final straw for Ratcliffe personally, who has apparently seen enough of a player who was supposed to provide the kind of disciplined and technically excellent defensive midfield base that United have desperately needed, and who has instead produced performances that have consistently disappointed and frustrated in equal measure. Being transfer listed rather than simply being available for offers sends a specific message about urgency and about the club's desire to generate funds from his departure, regardless of the price they receive. And the combination of Ugarte leaving and Casemiro departing on contract expiry creates two midfield vacancies that United must fill with significantly higher quality if the rebuild is to achieve its stated ambitions. Jadon Sancho's departure is moving towards its formal confirmation, with Sky Sports Germany reporting that the winger could be heading for a third spell with Borussia Dortmund on a free transfer when his United contract expires this summer. Dortmund manager Niko Kovac has reportedly approved Sancho's potential return, though Ola Book and Lars Ricken will make the final decision on whether to complete the deal. Sancho's United career, which began with such enormous promise and such enormous financial investment at £73 million in 2021, is ending in the quietest and most unremarkable fashion imaginable. 3 loan spells at Dortmund, Chelsea and Aston Villa, having defined his time in Manchester more than any of the United performances that were supposed to justify the transfer fee. His departure on a free costs United nothing except the residual embarrassment of confirming that the signing was a mistake and that the relationship never found the right level at which both parties could thrive. Carlos BALEBA, Alex Scott and Elliot Anderson round out the midfield target list that is being openly discussed in connection with United's summer planning, with Brighton having significantly reduced their asking price for BALEBA following a season in which his form has been less impressive than the previous campaign, and with Forest holding firm on their £100 million Anderson valuation for as long as their Premier League survival is confirmed. The breadth of the midfield shortlist reflects both the scale of United's ambition and the reality that in a market where multiple clubs are competing for the same limited pool of elite talent, having genuine alternative options is essential rather than optional. The permanent manager situation continues to advance in the direction that all credible reporting points to, which is Carrick being confirmed before the season ends. The combination of his results, his impact on the dressing room, the club declining alternative approaches, and the internal confidence that Romano and other credible journalists have described repeatedly makes this a question of timing rather than outcome at this stage. When the announcement comes, and it is coming, it will need to be followed quickly by clarity on the transfer budget, the recruitment priorities, and the specific targets that Carrick and the sporting director have identified as essential for the Champions League season that follows. 5 league games remaining. Brentford on Monday night, the Champions League confirmed for next season. A summer of transformation approaching with more names, more ambitions and more financial firepower than United have had available at any point since Ferguson's final years. And a manager whose appointment is about to become permanent, whose revolution at Old Trafford has already produced results that demanded recognition and whose work is only beginning. The quiet revolution is getting very, very loud. In other news, Manchester United are back in action on Monday night when Brentford visit Old Trafford, and the mood around the club could not be in a better place given the developments of the past 72 hours. Chelsea's 3-0 collapse at Brighton on Wednesday evening has extended United's advantage in the Champions League qualification race to a margin that is now so commanding it borders on mathematical certainty, with the Blues' European ambitions effectively reduced to a desperate and increasingly implausible prayer that a remarkable turnaround in results can somehow save a season that has been unravelling in the most public and most embarrassing fashion imaginable. United need to keep winning. They need to beat Brentford on Monday. And then they need to manage the final 4 matches of the season with the kind of professionalism and collective focus that has been the defining characteristic of everything Carrick has built since January. The broader context of the title race and the qualification picture has shifted dramatically in United's favour across the past week, and the opportunity that Monday's home fixture against Brentford presents to extend the lead even further and to take another decisive step towards confirmed Champions League football is one that Old Trafford will embrace with everything it has. Now let us get into the transfer news, because there is an enormous amount happening in multiple directions simultaneously, and every story has significant implications for what Manchester United look like next season and beyond. The Aurelien Tchouameni pursuit has developed further this week, with Fabrizio Romano confirming that the Real Madrid midfielder is genuinely appreciated at Old Trafford, alongside the other primary midfield targets of Elliot Anderson and Sandro Tonali. Romano was careful to note that there is not yet any indication that Real Madrid are willing to let Tchouameni go in the upcoming window, which is the crucial caveat that keeps this story in the category of serious interest and monitoring rather than imminent transfer activity. But the parallel development involving Chelsea's collapse and the potential consequences for the Enzo Fernandez market adds a fascinating new dimension to the Tchouameni situation that is worth examining in detail. Chelsea's dramatic 3-0 defeat at Brighton has accelerated the financial crisis that was already building around Stamford Bridge following their failure to qualify for the Champions League. The absence of Champions League revenue will almost certainly force Chelsea into significant player sales this summer, and Enzo Fernandez, who recently cast doubt on his own future at the club and was seen standing motionless in front of a sparse away end at full-time absorbing the justified anger of travelling supporters, has been attracting interest from Real Madrid. The connection between Fernandez potentially moving to Real Madrid and Tchouameni potentially becoming available is a direct and consequential one. Tchouameni is only likely to leave the Bernabeu if an elite central midfielder arrives to replace him, and if Real Madrid complete the signing of Fernandez from Chelsea, that specific condition could be met in a way that opens the door for United to make their move. Romano confirmed this week that United will not go for small names in their search for midfielders this summer, a statement that should be read as an unambiguous declaration of intent from a club that is preparing to return to the Champions League and wants its recruitment to reflect the ambitions of that return. Tchouaméni at 26, with 8 major honours won at Real Madrid, is emphatically not a small name. Anderson, with his England caps and his £100 million valuation, is not a small name. And Tonali, despite the controversy that surrounded his early Newcastle career, is a player who has re-established himself as one of the most complete midfielders in the Premier League, and whose interest from United, City and Arsenal simultaneously confirms his elite status. The Ederson story from Atalanta has developed further, with Italian outlet Tuttomercato Web reporting that United are now in a 3-way race alongside Atletico Madrid and Inter Milan for the Brazilian defensive midfielder. Atletico are described as the frontrunners given the personal terms agreement they have had in place with Ederson since February or March, but their inability to meet Atalanta's asking price of between 45 and 50 million euros has kept the door open for Premier League interest. United's initial contact over a potential deal represents the first concrete step from a club that Romano had recommended keep a close eye on this situation, and the financial package that an Ederson deal represents, a quality player available at a sensible price on a contract that runs to 2027, continues to make him an attractive option, regardless of whether the primary targets of Anderson and Tchouaméni can be delivered. The Elliot Anderson situation has been further complicated by a Telegraph report confirming that signing the Nottingham Forest midfielder would cost United at least £100 million if Forest maintain their Premier League status this season, with the club's improvement in the table having moved them away from the relegation zone.